Hi, everybody. Welcome to another installment of the MCAN Power Half Hour. I have a couple of guests with me here today, as you can see. I've got Emily from I know I always get your organization's name wrong, so it stresses me out. 350 Mass, but then there's also 350 Mass for a Better Future, right? Perfect. Okay, so there I got it right. Yeah. And then I've also got Joel here from Clean Water Action. Thank you so much for joining me, both of you. So I thought what we'd do is get started by telling the audience a little bit about what you guys do and what your organizations do. And actually, so I should also say that today we're going to be talking about the local clean energy toolkit, the 100% clean energy toolkit, which is part of the Mass Power Forward effort that MCAN and these folks have been working on. So Emily, tell us a little bit about 350 Mass for a Better Future.
Yeah, so 350 Massachusetts is a statewide volunteer-led climate action network. And so what we do is try to mobilize people all over the state to demand bold action on climate. And we have 14 chapters, we call them nodes, all over the state. And so I'm the director of organizing, and I try to support and help volunteers as they mobilize their communities. And we are part of an international movement under the banner 350. Which comes from the generally agreed safe limit of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is 350 parts per million. And right now,
we are above.
We are well above, so we have a lot of work to do. Yeah. And we, as 350 Mass, get staff support and some administrative support from an organization called Better Future Project. And so that's why, the names can be a little confusing. But mostly we're under the banner 350 Mass, and that's what you'll see if you're out in the world and interacting with the volunteers who are mobilizing in places all over the state.
Great. Joel, can you tell us a little bit about Clean Water Action and your work there?
Sure, and thanks, Carol, for having both Emily and I on the show.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure, and always excited to work with MCAN and MCAN chapters. Clean Water briefly is a national organization, and we do work on water and many other issues, toxic chemicals, and reform of them. So we want a safer, healthier environment for everyone. But we also in Massachusetts work quite a lot, and in New England work quite a lot on energy and climate change issues. And that's the function of my work primarily is energy. So both reducing emissions, but also expanding access to clean energy, and I think trying to aggressively drive on both the public health and environmental side of that, but also the equity. So right. We're thinking about that at all levels really, but including the local ones, and that can be like local programs that help get the word out about energy efficiency, or make sure that renters have access, or it can be other creative projects.
So I know that we were talking before the cameras were rolling about sort of how now really feels like a moment for action. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of interest in taking action on climate change. Things are not going to be moving at the federal level for a little while, or if they are, it's going to be in the wrong direction. And that therefore it becomes this moment where the local work is really, really important. The local work and the state work becomes even more important than it has been in the past. And that local work is a way to prove that these policies and programs and projects really make a difference. And that was why we wanted to have a chance to talk about the local clean energy toolkit today. So it's part of the Mass Power Forward effort. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Mass Power Forward?
Sure, yeah, thank you. So fortunate that we can work with, again, MCAN and 350 Mass for a Better Future in a large coalition of statewide groups and local groups as well. So huge. Environment, public health, faith, it's growing all the time. But so from the Berkshires to the Cape, in local communities and with statewide mobilizations, working on the clean energy transition here. So thinking about everything from, as power plants phase out, coal and nuclear plants shutting down, what power is coming online, but then also, and more pertinent to the discussion today, how does clean energy happen locally? What does that actually mean in terms of, what does clean energy and climate change mean in terms of community development and lived experience people have.
Right.
So these are the issues we're taking up, and the local energy toolkit that you'll hear about today, and that we'll talk about today, is kind of a corollary to some of the statewide work we're doing, trying to accelerate clean energy. And there's really, I think, in a number of cases, policy links where local action can bolster state action, which boosts regional and national efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we're all always conscious of sort of tying all of those pieces together and figuring out how they can work in synergy. And so I thought maybe what we do is talk a little bit about what the toolkit is and the need that it fills. So Emily, do you want to talk about sort of the what's in there and what the various pieces are? And I actually have some props for folks.
Yeah, so the context here is just like Carol was saying, all of us are seeing all over the state just tremendous interest from folks who want to push their local communities to be stronger on climate, who see and recognize that local action in the age of Trump is more important than ever. But folks don't necessarily always have the background or the context that they need to be able to do that right off the bat. And so what Mass Power Forward has put together, and I want to give a particular shout out to MCAN, because I think MCAN has been in this work for a long time, and in a lot of ways the rest of us are sort of leaning on and relying on the resources and expertise that MCAN has developed as we try to guide other newer folks into also being able to take action at the local level. And so what the toolkit includes is both a checklist that will help you assess your town's level of progress. And so the idea here is that, you may not know necessarily how far along your town is, and it's good to have a sense of progress so that you can figure out what makes sense as a next step for your town. So we have a checklist that you can take to your city government and try to figure out, okay, what has our town or city already done? And then there's also a set of resources once you have done that assessment process. We have some recommendations in terms of policies you can pursue, and then some fact sheets to help you understand what those policies are and what they mean and how you can learn more about them.
And also to connect you, right? Like one of the things that I like about the way we put this together, I can pat ourselves on the back, is like, for instance, we've got here a fact sheet about writing a net zero plan. And it talks a little bit about sort of what is a net zero plan, why would a town want to be net zero, what's the process, and then what goes into it. And then the last page on these is usually success stories. So we try to not only use that as an opportunity to give folks an idea of about how long it took to do something, how much effort was required, whether they had to have a professional come in and help them with it, but then also to give them an idea of who they can connect with, right? And this is something, as you were saying, that like MCAN's been working on for almost 2 decades now, of making sure that folks that are doing this on the city and town level are able to connect with other people who are doing it and therefore streamline their work. So I think that's, I like that piece of it, and I think that piece is really important, as well as the sort of just straight up expertise that we're providing for folks. And maybe it makes sense for us to, well, I guess we can actually get into it a little bit more later, but I think just talking about the need that it fills would be helpful. I mean, I know that this is something, I've heard from a lot of folks over the last couple months since we basically rolled this out, where people are like, well, I'd like to do something, but I don't know what. Or I'd like to do something and I have this great idea, and and then I'm able to say, actually your town already did that.
Yeah.
So you get to do the next step, right? You get to go a little bit beyond. But I mean, I know both of you have been in contact with a lot of places. What are you hearing in terms of the need that the toolkit is filling for these folks in towns?
Well, yeah, and even to back, I can speak to that, but even to back up a little bit, I think one thing that's interesting is, so climate change is a huge topic, right? It's perhaps, the biggest issue, and it's thinking about the atmosphere, literally, it's actually physically huge topic.
Right.
So people often say, what can I actually do to affect this issue? How is that possible? And one of the things that the toolkit centers people's thinking around
is like, well, what are the sources of pollution in my community? And that actually, while some of these things are model projects that are good things to do and will help, it's one possible intervention. That's actually one of the more essential kind of evaluation pieces of it, is understanding what and where pollution is in a community, and then from there forming a plan and building up sort of a team of people and the relationships in order to address that. So some communities, maybe they understand where the emissions are primarily coming from. Maybe it's a community that has a lot of vehicle traffic through it or truck traffic through it. Maybe other communities have, like, they know that they're a manufacturing hub and they have that. Other communities might be really surprised by where their sources of pollution are. Also, in thinking about how to address the solutions and how to address the pollution, how to come up with solutions to climate pollution and to taking climate action. I think once you understand where pollution is, what I spoke to before kind of regarding some of the sort of equity concerns, it also gives you some other ideas of how you might start thinking about addressing the problem. So if you know that, like, let's just say all the pollution is on one side of a city or one side of a town, right? Or there's pollution from transportation, but then actually transportation is primarily running along certain areas and not running elsewhere, right? It allows you to think about solutions that then might address multiple problems. So I think starting from there and having some case studies where some people have done really great, solid climate action plans. Other communities are, less far in the process of doing climate action, but have taken that sort of equity lens earlier in the process. It gives some people the mechanics of how do you do this climate action thing, and other people a new lens to add on, so when they go back to check how their community has implemented some of those steps, and it gives them some new tools to take on and dive deeper. And I think even one final thing is there are some simple initiatives that people can just say, oh, you know what, that's something we could do to just go one step further. So although I talked about some big picture things, it's like maybe people haven't actually done an evaluation of like, well, there are this many schools in my community, or in our county even, whatever, maybe have we actually thought about how many of those could have solar panels on them or be weatherized, and how many have been? There's just a lot of steps, and even municipal officials may not have really gone through all those things. So there's quite a lot of ways at the micro and macro level, I think, that this can be useful.
And I think too, one of the things that I'm hopeful with people using it, and we actually have a bunch we were talking about it, and somewhere between 30 and 40 towns doing this at this point. But I think one of the nice things about it is that it has enough things in it that it has a small enough number that people can not be overwhelmed and get started, but it has a large enough number of sort of policy solutions and project solutions and program solutions that people can move from one to the next. You can have a victory and then move on to the next thing and actually get more than one thing done in your community. You were going to say something, Emily.
Oh yeah, well, I was just going to add that I think just in terms of the need that this toolkit and this campaign fulfills, I think another piece of it is that having towns implement clean energy is a hugely important piece of fighting climate change. But it's not the only piece, right? We all know that to be successful, we're going to have to build a really powerful, really broad movement of people who care about this issue and who are willing to bring pressure to bear, not just at the local level, but at the state level and at the national level. And we think that these kinds of town-level campaigns can help us build that kind of movement. And so we aren't just approaching, say, a solar project or an energy efficiency project as one standalone activity, but really as part of an overall process of building a really bold, really powerful movement for climate action. And so this toolkit links the sort of specific policy changes and specific projects that can happen in any particular community with a bigger fight to move our entire society towards 100% renewable energy. And that's something that people all over the country are fighting for. And we just really hope that it helps people to see that their fight in their town is part of a much bigger struggle across the state and across the world, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to just so that folks know, I've got the greenhouse gas inventory thing here, and I think one of the things that's helpful about that piece, and obviously this is a printout, so it doesn't have the clickable links, but if folks go online, you can see that there are clickable links of where to get the data for all of these pieces. So, you know, again, we try to give enough information that folks are able to complete these sort of individual tasks, and then, as Emily pointed out, sort of link that to the bigger fight and the bigger. We all know that we need to get to 100%, and how do we do that? We can start out at the town level and prove these successes. And actually, what I'll do is that I'm going to try to remember to give we've got a website where all of these materials are, so anybody who's watching this can go to it, and the short link is bit.ly/local clean. So that is where you'll find all of these materials, the checklists, the fact sheets. There's sort of an overview fact sheet as well that talks about why would you want local energy and why would you want clean energy, which I thought we should talk about, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are we even fighting for this stuff, right? Like, and not just in the climate context, but why would we want, like, why is local energy better than buying wind from Texas?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many reasons, but to me, the most important and most compelling one is that we need to build an economy here in New England that's powered by clean energy. We know that there's tremendous economic opportunity associated with installing more solar, associated with building huge offshore wind farms, like the way that we could be.
We had an offshore wind show a couple months ago.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And doing things like implementing energy efficiency, thinking about how to reduce car transportation and move folks to bikes and to walking and to public transit. And unless we make those transitions here in New England, we are really the region that's going to be a leader. And so unless we can make that here and really show the rest of the country what's possible and show the kind of economic opportunities that are associated with clean energy, we're just never going to make the transition we have to. So.
And Joel, I know that you've got sort of a bunch of numbers in your head about sort of how much money we send out of state right now for our energy needs, right?
Yeah,
It's
yes.
huge.
Yeah, so if you look back, I mean, to so we're just ending our reliance on coal in Massachusetts, but historically we've sent billions
Every year.
I believe it's $18 billion dollars a year go out of state to pay for fossil fuels.
Right. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, we should be making it here.
Right. So some of those dollars would land in like West Virginia, but some of them would have gone even internationally.
Right, Venezuela.
Right.
I know was one place we were getting coal from.
Yeah, and there's no reason why it's bad to support another state or another place's economy, but ultimately, if we're talking about like the prosperity of our region and the sustainability of our region, and employment of people in our region, we want to be both doing the thing that's best for public health and the environment, and then also figuring out how the bills we pay monthly relate to that and actually can be an investment in supporting people's quality of life. So as we're trying to use energy efficiency and local energy to actually reduce costs, to build fewer big transmission lines, to in fact actually not have to buy fuel, right?
Right.
We also want the dollars we do spend to create opportunity here. And so people can feel proud. And working at the most local level, what's great is that you can say, all right, I pay my monthly bill and I voted for these certain things in town. And I see that this outreach campaign or this solar farm is right here, and it's actually all connected, right? It's like the actions we've taken are very literally connected. The people I voted for and I've called are continuing to support and advance policies that will continue more of this, but I've also really gotten involved with physically making stuff happen.
Yeah, and I grew up in a very tight-knit community in Western North Carolina, and I sort of feel like all of my community organizing is in some ways trying to recreate that very tight-knit feeling of community, and I think that the more that we engage folks in their towns and their cities with each other, and the more that they're engaged with these processes, the better their lives are going to be, and the more connected, I mean, it's just there. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody recently about climate resilience in regards to, when there were those terrible heat waves in Chicago, and the communities that were better connected to each other had less deaths because people were checking on each other, and people were saying, look, I've got air conditioning, you can come over to my place, or whatever like that. And I think that's maybe a side benefit of all of this, is that it brings the towns together, it brings the cities together, it brings the community together cohesively, which
and I think that's also often an overlooked benefit of moving to clean energy, is that solar and wind are more resilient in the face of extreme weather and the kind of impacts we know are coming, because you're just generating your energy right there, and you're not transmitting at long distances. You're not worried about fuel shortages or extreme weather that can shut down a power plant. And so I think that's a benefit too.
Yeah, and we were talking about this yesterday. We've been spending a lot of time together recently, the three of us. But we were talking about this, about sort of the connectedness of sort of the energy use and the energy production as a benefit. I mean, I think it really truly is a way to make our lives better. So does anybody want to sort of, you've got the handbook, which I feel like we should quickly cover before we're out of time. But so do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of how that helps walk people through the process? Because how do you start from scratch?
Right, so this is in a lot of ways basically identical to what the other materials that Carol showed earlier, but just put together in a package that makes it a little easier, exactly like you're saying, if you're starting from scratch.
Where you can print out the whole thing and
just look through it. So we sort of go through why clean energy is important, some of the sort of ideas that we've just shared just now, and then take folks through this campaign, where really what we're trying to do is give folks as many options as possible for pushing for local clean energy and for pushing their towns closer to 100% renewable energy. So there's sort of an overview of the campaign. There's a sample resolution. So some folks are working on getting their cities and towns to pass resolutions setting a goal of 100% renewable energy. So there's a sample of that. And there's also a sort of step-by-step guide to how you could pass a resolution like that in your town or city.
And the idea too, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but the idea is that any of these materials can be changed for your city or town.
Absolutely.
And handed out at your town meeting.
So please make these your own, use them, take as much of the material as you want. Absolutely, we would love to see folks sort of customize these and put them to use. And so then there's also, in addition to the resolution, there's the checklist we talked about earlier for assessing your town's progress. There's a link to some of these fact sheets and a set of specific policy recommendations depending on the level of progress of your town or city. And then there's a step-by-step guide to what it looks like to bring climate and clean energy projects to a particular town or city. And I think this is something that we intend to keep adding to and keep modifying as we go along. So we're hoping that this will become more and more substantial over time.
And I think it might just be worth saying for a moment, because we're talking about this, movement towards 100% renewable energy. But just briefly, because people throw questions out there. How does it happen? What's the specific pathway? Is it possible? So I think we're going to assert that it's possible. Yes. And without diving into the sort of engineering specifics of it, we're kind of moving from a time where we've used these big power plants to produce energy when we need it most, and that's the times that are most are like the really hot summer days, really cold winter nights. So some of the ways we're balancing that out is like offshore wind during the winter and the cold evenings, solar, sunny days, summers. But we're also rolling out battery storage and starting to get that down from this industrial level to more localized applications. And one of the examples of how this is working in a municipal energy project is a pilot in the Sterling Municipal Light Plant area, so Sterling, Mass, town of Sterling, Mass, using battery storage. So whether you're whether you have that kind of utility where it's publicly owned or you live in an investor-owned, such as National Grid or Eversource, there's really interventions you can make to go on the pathway towards 100% renewable. And this is still, when we say 100% renewable, it's actually a whole wide set of resources that are, clean and healthy. but also bring our energy dollars home. So we're talking about weatherization, wind, solar, battery storage, anaerobic digestion, a number of different resources that work at different times of day that have different advantages to them, but that can create the power we need, to keep the lights on and also to reduce our carbon footprint or our greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah. And to make our lives better and make our homes more comfortable. I mean, this is something, that I always think about with energy efficiency is like, it's like, that's a pretty direct life improvement, right? Because I spend a lot of time like turning the thermostat down otherwise.
And dealing with drafty windows.
I know, exactly.
Absolutely.
And like my feet being always cold and like, no, let me have an energy efficient home and not have to worry about it so much. And that's so much more comfortable. So, I mean, I guess the only question that I feel like we should continue, or that we should answer before we're done, is like, who do we want to have using this? We've got this fabulous resource, and like maybe we should just go around and say like, who's our sort of dream user? Like, who would we, or who all would we like to see utilizing the toolkit?
I mean, I really think anyone who is interested in pushing their town or city to take more leadership in clean energy and in fighting the climate crisis. So I think it works for folks who have a lot of experience and maybe can help us add to it and help us sort of think about what it needs to include.
And we're always looking for feedback.
Absolutely. And I think that it also works really nicely for folks who are brand new and who are just getting started. And I think it works for folks who are planning to lead a campaign. And it also works for folks who just want to be part of a campaign but want to have some of the context of kind of what's going on.
Yeah, so in many communities there might be a local sustainability group that might be interested in taking this on. Many are currently.
Energy committee.
Yeah, energy committee. If your church has has like a green sanctuary or some other kind of green the church, green the temple, synagogue effort going on, and you're really thinking about how to expand it community wide, it might be one way of doing it is thinking about projects that you can do. And I think the biggest thing, other than kind of starting to evaluate where you're at, is really building out a team of people to work with if you don't have one already.
Find your team.
So in many places, like it's also true that maybe people get interested in fighting climate change and they don't have a built network established already. But that's okay, right? You can talk to your neighbors, you can talk to the people you see at the supermarket, again, like your congregation, other parents at the school, other kids at the school.
I will also say, I mean, Indivisible is, I want to encourage any Indivisible groups to get in touch with us about this. So we are actually just about out of time. So thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And we will see you on the next installment of the MCAN Power Half Hour. Thanks.